Hello from Blue Willow Bookshop in Houston, Texas. I am Cathy Berner, the event coordinator at the shop. My colleagues and I are honored to host this virtual event celebrating the publication of Alexis Hall's novel, Pansies, the last reissue in the Spire's Quartet, as I'm calling it. Thank you so much to our partners at Sourcebooks Casablanca for working with us on this event. So let's welcome Alexis to the conversation.
Hello, sorry, it took me a second to find the mute button. Hi, everybody!
Hello, friend. I am so glad to hear from you today.
I'm so glad to be here today. It's lovely.
It is. So, I'm going to do some show and tell.
Woo!
First of all, here's the Pansies cover with my
Yay.
nails that
Uh,
match Alfie's
Coordinated as
shirt.
always.
I mean, match Fenn's shirt. I'm very proud of that. And I'm going to show y'all what you can get if you order from Blue Willow, or what you probably have at home if you have ordered from Blue Willow. This lovely art card with art by Dank Art. A book plate signed by Alexis with a little flower drawn on it. A sticker of Alfie and Fenn. And this lovely wristlet that you can keep keys on. So fun. Thank you, Sourcebooks, for partnering with us on that. That's really great. Also, just because I'm all into sources of joy this week, my friends, I want to show you a bookmark that a bookseller friend sent me, which is images of Tom Holland doing the umbrella dance. I think it's pretty fabulous. Okay, that is that. There's also a great Pansies playlist. I loved it, Alexis.
Oh, thank you so much.
You are welcome. And it totally set the mood. I was immediately in South Shields. So the first thing I want to talk about is all of the rabbit holes that I went down. I think this might be the most rabbit holes I've gone down for an Alexis Hall book.
It's quite a rabbit holey book.
It is an excellent rabbit holey book. So, things in no particular order. And we'll get to questions on some of these. Language. I love what you and Mary made with the semi-obscure northern dialectical terms of the day on Instagram. My favorite three of those were slaistering, malicize, and my very favorite is barbarous. And if any of you want to revisit those, you can go to Alexis's Instagram page, and I think it's the story collection to the furthest left with the initials SONDT of D. So highly recommend that look. It was great. I am a musical theater fan, and I found myself re-listening to a ton of musical theater. I personally prefer Ireland from Legally Blonde to Oh My God, You Guys, although I agree, Oh My God, You Guys is a huge bop.
What? Which one's Ireland?
It's the one that when she's going to the salon and the woman who she befriends in the salon basically gives her
Oh,
the
of
life
course.
story.
Yes, of course.
So I
Yeah.
loved that. Also, the shout outs to Julie Andrews.
God, I love some
So,
Julie.
yes.
Oh,
So,
this is from before Julie Andrews was the voice of Bridgerton as well. Like,
oh, yeah. So here we go. I'm stealing this from Ted Lasso. What is your one of your favorite Julie Andrews roles?
oh, I mean, it's one of those don't make me picks. For like kind of, I'm a huge fan of Victor Victoria personally.
Yeah.
Just because
Okay. That's
it
fantastic. I
yeah,
pick Princess Clarice Rinaldi of Genovia.
that is also legit.
Yes. So fun fact, and this is a bit of a humble brag, but like I said, I'm going back for joy.
That is
In
entirely fair.
2009, I
Oh,
had
don't,
the I
you
had
said
the
joy. Now you're reminding us how old we all are.
I had the chance to meet Julie Andrews.
Okay, that is pretty joyful.
And I had her sign my copy of The Last of the Really Great Wang Doodles,
Oh, fantastic.
which I have had since I was very young in
Oh,
1975. So anyway, that's like, thank you for reminding me of that. I spent like half an hour digging through my old books, thinking about that, trying to figure out
Looking for your
when.
wang doodles, as one so often does.
Yes. Okay. Also, Mincella's Ice Cream Parlor.
Yes.
I have already picked out exactly what I'm ordering if I ever go.
Legit.
I also thought about, could I work there over the summer? But they said you have to be really good at driving in Britain, and I am not.
Yeah, probably not.
No, but man, that looked like a really fun thing to do.
Oh, it could be
Um,
cute.
your Fibonacci shout out. Like the Fibonacci sequence, which
Hmm.
y'all can look up if you want, and I'll probably share a link to it in my email, is legendary in my family.
Oh,
Like,
really?
if we ever play, like, anytime there was a picture book about Fibonacci, I bought it for the kids. Because I married into a scientific family, and that
Hmm.
was the number sequence that they love. Like, if not that we ever play the lottery that much, but if we do, we use the Fibonacci sequence.
Oh, interesting.
And if we ever won, we promised we would buy a house and call it Casa Fibonacci.
That is fair.
Um, economics and finance, econometrics and finance. I had to figure out the differences between those. I learned about the keelmen of Tyne and Ware. I learned about lifeboats. I have also picked out what I will eat if I go to Coleman's Seafood Temple, including they have a whole page devoted to their signature gin and tonics. So there are several I want to try. And then Pete talking about the Great British Bake Off.
Ah, yes.
This, and for those of you who sometimes watch, this season, in my opinion, is one of the best seasons.
Oh, really?
Oh my gosh, it's so good. The bakers are lovely.
Oh,
They are
fantastic.
so great. All right, those were my rabbit holes. So as you can see, I mean, I spent a very
That's a
great,
lot of rabbit holes.
it's a lot of rabbit holes. So look at this. This is all four Spire's books together.
I'll check them out. Awful Flies books so far, to use the Simpsons meme.
Ooh, that's very fun. And we'll talk about that too. But
Yes.
then also, y'all, I have to show you that because you know how I love my tabs and they're color themed. And that is very heavy, that many Spires books. Like, I could use this as strength training. I could, work that in.
Just duct tape them to your wrists.
Exactly.
Don't do
So
that. Spoilers.
now that the first four are complete, looking back on it now, what has the process been like revisiting all four and looking forward?
Oh, good lord. Weird, I think is the really short answer. Like because obviously, which they're from quite a long time ago. Like there's a I was just thinking today. There's a reference there's a reference in Pansies to the to McDonald's being served in polystyrene, and that's not a thing anymore. Yeah. Also, also, it's from a time when hope existed. So
Stop. No, no.
sorry, that is a joke. Hope still
Yes.
exists. Hope very much lives in all of us. No, it's been a long time. And you do kind of look back, and they were the whole process is a process of kind of particularly because I've made some changes, and I think I even spoke in a recent newsletter about the process of making changes to Pansies, and it's been quite complex having to consciously. I was going to say consciously walk that balance, and that's not a phrase. Consciously strike that balance, walk that line between being true to the person I was then and trying to just sort of sand down some of the rough edges, but not too many of the rough edges because having rough edges is part of who I was then.
Right.
And try and just kind of keep things as not as they would be if I'd written them today, because I'm very much a believer that all art, but books are my particular thing that I do because novelist. Yeah, but all art is kind of a product of a time and a place, and so I don't want it to be. I don't want it to be the book I would have written if I was writing it today, but I think I wanted to make it the book I would have written then if I'd been as experienced as I am today. If you see the subtle distinction.
I
Um,
do, and I agree. And I think you did it, and each one of
oh,
them
thank you.
have given us have given us such wonderful things. I was kind of looking back over the four of them, and with Glitterland, you get the gift of Darien.
Hmm.
And in Flood, you've got the sense of place, and then you gave us Waiting for the Light.
Yep.
And then for real, the plane with point of view and with tense and those gorgeous characters and all the gorgeous side characters who have come along.
Uh-huh.
And now we have Pansies with, I think I mean, at least for me, it has an even stronger sense of place than all the Spires novels.
I
For
think
me,
there's a I think sometimes sense of place is a lot is I think there are certain kinds of place that just kind of come across more strongly almost inherently, and I think for me at least the thing about the northeast of England is it's got such a specificity to it. I think also because I'm extremely conscious, and we might come back to this in the Q&A session, because I am extremely conscious that I am writing about Britain for an audience that is mostly not British. I think something I quote a lot in a lot of the opening things is I don't quote it a lot. I quoted in one of them is that Lord line about living in cities you never see on TV. And it's particularly important for me when I am writing about bits of the country that don't get movies set in them or TV shows set in them or costume dramas set in them a lot of the time. Um, to an audience that lives in America and is therefore probably never going to go to these places and may well never actually meet a British person in real life, to make sure those places come across as real and vibrant and unique in their own thing and not just kind of London again.
right, exactly. And it is, that was the word I was going to about to say when you said it is vibrant. There is this sense of vibrancy um in this book that is, I always feel that your books are vibrant, but this one, it just is especially so.
Hmm.
And again, so I always do a reread right before. So I
Huh?
was reading up until 2 hours ago and just so engulfed in it. And I'm staring at the book cover, looking back at me. It just, I, it's so good. And one of the things I was thinking about is that they both have so much grief and growth and change to go
Hmm.
through.
Exactly.
And it doesn't happen linearly. It doesn't
Yeah.
happen equally. It's not like they're going like this.
No,
It's
exactly.
like one of those weird graphs
Yeah.
I'm sure Alfie knows the name of that,
Oh God, I probably should as well, actually. I know what you mean. Yeah.
that has all these different uh ups and downs and backs and forths. And I always say, I see what you're going to do, and I want to see how you're going to do it. And you navigated that so beautifully. Like I could get such a strong sense of that.
Hmm.
And I really appreciated it.
Oh, thank you so much.
You are so welcome.
Oh,
And
thank you.
I love when Fen full name's Alfie Bell.
Hmm.
It makes me super happy. Um, I am also, and many of you who are return viewers know I love to quote that Brian Washington line from Memorial. And now there's going to have to be, I'm going to try not to cry. There's going to have to be a new line next to it that
Oh.
may even end up being my email signature. And Alexis, just prepare to get squirmy. Um, Page 186. Sometimes I think that's all love is: understanding, smoothing away your strangeness, making you part of the world, not separate from it. I was reading that last night and I started to cry, and
Oh.
I'm starting to cry now, but that is exactly what it is. And it's familial love, and it's romantic love, and it's
Mhm.
friendship love, and it's giving a safe space.
And I think that's very much what I was trying to convey, and I hope that.
Well, you did. And look at that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Only
Oh.
15 minutes in, you made me cry.
Oh.
Um, it's all good. So, hang on, I need to be able to see the screen. So, anyway, I loved it. And now here's the part when you can get squirrely again. Your work is such a bright light
Thank you so much.
in my life and the lives I'm guessing everyone who's on here. So, thank you.
That's very kind
All
of you.
right. Now we're moving to questions.
Questions. Woo!
Here's one from Monica. In the annotations, I loved this. You mentioned that David is a bit of a dandy, but not a pointy shoes type of dandy. What is the difference? And can you maybe give us a glimpse into David's personal dandy style from Fool's Gold, which we're hoping is that's part of?
So I think point to me a pointy shoes dandy is a dandy who dresses to be seen. A dandy
Ah,
who wants to stand out, a dandy who I was almost going to use the term peacocking, which is obviously something that comes from the pickup artist community and therefore has some really dodgy connotations. But someone who is trying to express their confidence, as it were. Whereas I think the other kind of dandy is honestly it's the kind of dandy I write more often in some ways is is a dandy who dresses as armor. It's a dandy for whom being very immaculate about I'd say about their appearance, although it often winds up being about his appearance because dandy is quite a gender-coded term, and often the characters I'm written about are specifically men. Um, and so often it's about projecting a particular kind of image. And obviously, like literally, you could be doing that with pointy shoes, but just sort of almost like almost metaphorically, the pointy shoes dandy is probably not like that. Whereas it's something like, and to give some parallel examples from my other work, for example, so Ash is a dandy, but not a pointy shoes dandy. Like he presents himself immaculately, but that is because he is in many ways terrified of being seen.
right.
To the extent that he very specifically wears sleeves to cover his scars and that kind of thing. To pick a non-Spires example, John from the Mortal Follies series is a dandy and is almost both sorts of dandy because obviously
Right.
he simultaneously wants to fit in with his society, but also to outdo a society that rejects him. So it's not really about literally how he dresses. I'm not saying that he never ever wears pointy shoes. It's about why he dresses that way, and it's about being the kind of person that wants to control how they are perceived, not to just be, all eyes on me in the center of the ring, just like a circus.
Okay. Can you say anything about anything that's coming or not?
Ooh, in terms of Fool's Gold. I think probably not. I don't want to tease too much, if that's
Totally
all
fine.
right.
Totally fine.
He is in it, but I don't want to say more than that.
No worries. I know I am not alone in saying that I'm very eager
Hmm.
to see what else comes in this universe because it's a lovely universe to read in.
Thank you very much. But yeah.
Here we're going to talk a little bit about romance. I
Mm.
mean, obviously your
Yeah,
books are romance,
yeah.
but
Who thought?
this is
Yeah.
a little more specific. This one's from Carrie. She is curious what draws you to the romance genre as a writer. Is there something in this genre that lets you express as a writer what other genres do not?
Um, to you'll know we've done a million of these. You'll know I do the two answers thing. It's a bit of a yes and no. Um, basically, I like kissing. I like I like the core assumptions of the romance genre are a central love story and a happy ending. And that's a kind of story I like to read and like to tell, and there's a market for. Um, I don't I don't like, and this cuts both ways. Let's be super clear. This cuts both ways. I don't like the idea that beyond like core genre definitions, that there are things you can or can't explore
Mm,
in a particular genre. Like within the confines of a central love story with a happy ending, you can tell a story about literally anything. You can tell stories about grief, you can tell stories about
yes.
loss, you can tell stories about solving crimes, you can tell stories about the Peninsular War. Um, and so I don't mean that. Let's be clear. I don't mean that in a way that is disparaged in any way, in a way that is disparaging to romance as a genre. I was going to say about any genre at all. Like what I like about romance is I like kissing. What I like about fantasy is I like dragons. I mean, obviously, again, not literally kissing, because one could write a romance with a character who doesn't like to kiss, because some people don't. Might do that one day. You could write a fantasy in which there are no literal dragons. You could write a science fiction novel in which there are no literal spaceships. But broadly, I write like romance novels because I like kissing. I write fantasy novels because I like dragons. Write science fiction novels because I like spaceships. I've written a mystery because I like murders. I mean, obviously, not in real life. Murders in real life are bad, but murders in fiction are fun. Um, so and I think it's really important to me to recognize that I'm a big champion of sorry, if you're doing the drinking game, this is the Bart bit. One of the Bart bits, there'll probably be several. You might be a bit bladdered by the end of this evening. Are you familiar with bladdered? Is that an American
I
thing?
am familiar with it, and if you're not familiar with it, please look it up.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of pleasurable texts. I What I like about genre fiction is that it's stories people want to read. And that's all it is. And if you can't write a book that's also about, whatever themes you want your book to be about, while also making it the kind of story people want to read, you know, try hard. Yeah, and obviously, I'm not saying there's no place for literary fiction. Like
Of
obviously,
course you're not.
literary
Of-
fiction does have its place. Like sometimes people do just want to write a book that's just doing the artsy stuff, but I think it's important to remember that there's a I'm not a huge believer in the separation between high culture and low culture. It's it's a bit of a cliche to play the whole like kind of, well, if Shakespeare was alive today he'd be writing for EastEnders card, but if Shakespeare was alive today he'd be writing for EastEnders. Most of the greatest works of like literature in the like of the high art literature sense were, you know, either written because, the socio-political slash economic circumstances in which they were written meant that you kind of had to write that kind of thing because, you live in Rome and you just kind of have to write epic poetry and plays. Or they were written as kind of popular entertainment. Like Shakespeare didn't sit down and say, I am going to
right.
dissect the human condition. He sat down and said, shit, what's going to pay my bills this week? You know, the other theatre companies are on my ass.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That is great. So you also in that conversation, you also answered what's important and wonderful about genre fiction, and you talked about why write kissing books as opposed to the other kinds of kissing books. So, Carrie, that answers both of your questions, and Karen, that answers yours too. Well done, Alexis. Did it without even knowing.
Yay! That's
Um,
the advantage of going off on tangents.
it's beautiful. Um, this one's from Sorry. What musical would Fen invite Alfie to go and experience now, 6 years on, assuming no geographical restrictions?
Oh God, like I will say partly it's quite funny to say assuming no geographical restrictions, given that like kind of as we've established, sense of place is a huge part of the book. There's an extent to which it should be something that's on at the Sunderland Empire or in Newcastle. Um, Having said that, I think it varies quite a lot. Because I think it depends on who you're trying to please. Obviously, sometimes dead now, so but like Fen would definitely have wanted to go and see the company revival in the gender flipped Bobby, and would have loved it. Alfie maybe wouldn't entirely get it because the company's a bit odd in that regard because it's just about kind of people having their lives. Um, I think they'd probably go and see at least one like existing intellectual property, the musical. Although, well, first of all, obviously, Pretty Woman the musical appears in a different book, and also my understanding is it wasn't that great, is from what I've heard from reviews. Um, I've heard at least some positive things about Back to the Future the musical. I think the other thing they might genuinely both really enjoy is Heathers. And that might be my Heather's bias showing up, but I think they are. pretty much the right age to remember the original movie. Maybe not when it first came out, but probably from a TV rerun. And it is genuinely a good musical, so Fame would like it, and it is full of absolute bangers. So Alfie would secretly like it, and depending on how much he's moved on and getting comfortable with things, just openly admit he likes it. I think Alfie would really appreciate I Love My Dead Gay Son, because I think that's his sense of humor.
Yeah, it is. Um, Also, just shout out to the way you navigated Alfie's family relationship.
Oh, thank you.
Um, Here is one from Heather. Uh,
How ironic.
Heather loves getting the chance to peek behind the scenes while reading the annotations, and is curious how reflecting on your own writing and sharing some of your thoughts with the reader fits into your philosophy of the death of the author and your preference for a private personal life.
Yeah, I'm not going to say there's absolutely no conflict. I did find I did have to think very hard about the annotations for exactly that reason, and like there's a reason my books don't usually have annotations in them. Um, I think when it comes to the private personal life stuff, I don't think there's anything too personal in any annotations. I think again I think because the themes of the book are very intense. I think necessarily it involves some sort of sharing my thoughts about things. So there's perhaps more of that kind of personal reflection stuff in there. But I'm happy to muse on subjects. What you're not going to get is me telling you like kind of, my shoe size or things like that. Yeah, or what schools the Dutch children go to. But that they're homeschooled. Because there's difficulties integrating ducks into human schools. Um, I think with the death of the author stuff, that gets into again, please drink if you're doing the Bart thing. Um, for me, like death of the author doesn't mean the author doesn't exist or is irrelevant. Like sometimes, and I've seen this with discussions of texts whose authors are occasionally not great on Twitter, who live in Scotland and write children's books. Um, which is like there's some tendency to use kind of the death of the author to just mean you should just completely divorce the author from the text in all contexts, and that's not really what, as I understand it, that's not really Bart was getting at. Bart was writing in quite a specific context, and that context was a school of literary criticism where it was just kind of assumed that the point of reading was to work out what the author was saying. And that almost that if you could just kind of go to the author and ask them what they meant, and shortcut the whole process, that would be easier. And not quite, but close to. And there's and that and that school of criticism is still quite common. I think weirdly, particularly in genre fiction. Particularly in I think sometimes you see it a lot in fandom spaces. I think sometimes perhaps more in science fiction or fantasy fandom spaces.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a whereas to I'll back up slightly. Um, so to me, the death of the author doesn't mean that I am it doesn't mean that I am irrelevant, because it is valid to be interested in what the author might think, like as in the same way one might be interested in, in the same way that you might be interested in anything else about a person that was involved in a thing. You might be, and there are situations where you might be using a book in a way that's about exploring the context it was written in. If you're reading a historical book, for example, then knowing the historical context in which it was written makes a difference. Knowing what was knowing about the background of the wars of religion, for example, makes put Shakespeare into a different context. Knowing right down to like little tiny things like knowing that Queen Elizabeth's right to the throne was based on Henry VIII's marriage to Catherine of Aragon being annulled on the grounds that marrying your brother's wife, because within the teachings of the church, the husband and wife become one flesh, was therefore literally incestuous. Knowing that's actually quite interesting to interpreting Hamlet, where Hamlet is really, repulsed by the idea of his mum marrying his dad's brother. But at the same time, you don't need to know that to appreciate the play. And if you want to think that, like, kind of that Hamlet is really upset because his fucking dad died, that is also valid in some ways interpreting Hamlet for a modern audience. That's in some ways more relevant and more interesting. If you were teaching Hamlet in a school, depending on the kind of students you had, it might be better to say, well, if your dad died and then your mum immediately married his brother, that would be fucked. Rather than, well, actually, there's quite an interesting thing about the status of spouses, partners, um, siblings. Um, and in the same way, so it's okay to be interested in what I think about my own books. It's just that what I think about my books doesn't supersede what you think about my books.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that if I wrote a particular thing because I was thinking of X, but you think it reminds you of Y, your Y is as valid as my X. Another way to think about it is that do you remember how I talk about sticking with Shakespeare examples? I don't know why I'm sticking with Shakespeare examples. You remember how my thing for the Mortal Follies series is like, what if Midsummer Night's Dream was canon?
Yes, I do
Um,
remember that.
yeah. So part of the thing I'm guessing at there is that the word canon to me has two meanings, and
Okay.
I tend to use the second meaning, whereas I think fandom uses the first meaning. And
Okay.
what if Midsummer Night's Dream was canon is almost like kind of taking the second meaning and reading the first meaning out of it. So the Shakespearean canon is all the plays Shakespeare wrote.
Right.
Tolkien's canon is all the books Tolkien wrote and also all of Tolkien's letters and a bunch of other things.
Right.
But when people talk about what's canon in Lord of the Rings, they kind of mean like what's actually true in Lord of the Rings. Like
Got it.
what is there's some obvious examples like this, like the guy that Frodo meets in the Prancing Pony in Bree is a human man named Aragorn, not a hobbit with wooden feet called Trotter, which, according to Tolkien's letters and his notes, he would have been in some drafts. So Trotter is within the canon of the letters, but he's not canon in the canon sense. Um, and so I think the if I had to sum it up, I think I'd say that like the annotations in the re-releases of the special editions of the I've lost the all called Spire's books are their canon in they are part of the canon of stuff Alexis Hall has written sense, but they're not canon like like the fandom usage of the word. They're not canon in the sense that if I say this, I go right down to like kind of so I you know there's like some of the annotations are historical annotations about like kind of places in South Shields, for example. Um, like you get sort of again, I haven't looked at those annotations since I wrote them, which was a while ago now. But the canon history of Minchillas in Pansies, if you see what I mean,
Yeah.
is whatever you. So there's a brief reference to it having been founded by Italian immigrants in the 9th century, and that type one definition canon. If you have a head canon about Minchillas as it exists in the Pansies universe, that is no more valid than what I put in the notes or than the real history of Minchillas. If you think that Minchillas serves a particular ice cream in your head canon that they don't really serve in real life, it's not relevant to the book or to your experience of the book.
Got it. Got it.
I think is my take. So I don't feel that me providing my perspective or some insight into my thoughts has really conflicts with Death of the Author in any particular way because part of Death of the Author is the recognition that my comments are just comments.
Yeah. Well, that was fabulous, and I
Thank you very
love that,
much.
and I'm going to go back and re-listen to that. Um, Here is one from Jerry. Capturing the local language and slang seems to be a big part of the Spire series. Is it difficult to capture the eccentricities and character of regional dialects while also keeping things easy to understand for the reader? And how do you draw that line in your writing?
Is how do is it easy? No. How do you draw the line? You should do your best, really. It's partly that's what editors are for. My editor is American, and will say, this genuinely is unintelligible, and I have sometimes people say like this is unintelligible. I will say that it's a decision I put a lot of thought into, particularly because because one of the things I'm extremely conscious of is that prestige dialects are never phonetically transcribed, but non-prestige dialects are. And there are contexts where I actively try and fight against that. So, notably, for example, for example, a good example of this is in Rosalind Palmer Takes the Cake.
Yep.
Um, Most of the kind of the slightly the South London dialect in that um is not phonetically transcribed because I didn't want to mark that character as low prestige particularly. He's not supposed to be low prestige. He just happens to come from a different background to Rosalind. Whereas in a lot of the Spires series, those questions of class and regionality are a lot more marked because they're a lot more pertinent. Or 10 Things is another good example. In 10 Things, there's a whole bunch of regional dialects going on,
Oh
and
yeah.
they're very lightly marked because although some aspects of the regionality are important, they're not as much part of the conflict as they are
Uh-huh.
in um in some of the
Spire.
Spies books. So if you
In
think about
Spires.
Ash and Darian in Glitterland, then Ash coming to see Darian as something other than just like Essex is part of the conflict. And if you think about so much of Pansies is about both Fen and Alfie dealing with their identity as Northerners, as people from South Shields,
Mm-hmm.
and they've also both very specifically lost their accents. And Fen, I think, probably more willingly than Alfie. Like they've both very specifically gone away. They've had to adjust their speech for other people, and so
Mm-hmm.
as well as it being just kind of important to me to represent that dialect to sort of introduce it to an audience, it's also
Yeah.
it's relevant to the plot in the way it's not always.
Yeah. So I think this reminds me of that wonderful conversation you had with Becca Title, who is the owner of Meet Cute Bookstore in San Diego, and you talked a lot about language and dialect, and I will
Yes.
throw that link into the email that I send out to y'all. Um, Here is, you know what? There are so many questions in the Q&A. Just one thing, I'm going to do one last one here. Pansy seems to have a more tenuous connection to Oxford than the other Spires books. Where did Alfie go to uni before doing his master's at LSE? Um, and
I
and if Alfie had gone to Oxford and had the same residential uni experience as some of the other Spires characters, do you think he would have had a more varied sex life and acknowledged his sexuality sooner?
so I don't think I have a clear idea in my head of which specific university he went to. He probably went to one of the London ones. Might have he did maths, so possibly Imperial. Um, in terms of whether he'd have had a different experience at Oxford, I think very much not. Like Oxford isn't magic. Oxford is very different from other universities, but I wouldn't say that one of the things that makes it different is that it's like more a place of discovering your sexuality than any other university. I mean, possibly less so because obviously it's a very, very traditional place. Um, so I think like Alfie's slowness in discovering his identity is to do with how he was raised, who he is, the to an extent the ease with which he could manifest so much of what he was taught that manliness was. And so that itself would have made it hard for him to acknowledge, some of the other ways in which his identity was at odds with what he had been taught manliness was. And that would have been true at any university. And I certainly don't want to give the impression that the University of Oxford is some kind of pan-queer utopia, because it definitely is not.
Right,
Um,
right.
it is just a university.
Yep. Um, okay, I am now going to turn to the event submitted Q&A. Thank you everybody who submitted ahead of time. Alexis has those links, and if he has time in his schedule, which is very full, and chooses to answer them, that's up to him. Um, but before I do that, one of the things that definitely came to mind as I was rereading Pansies, can't remember what book I read a long time ago, but the female protagonist, I remember her saying to a family member, "Why can't I be both?"
Hmm.
And I thought a lot about that, especially with Alfie.
Hmm.
Why can't he be both? And
Yeah,
he can be both. And I
exactly.
think I have great hopes that he will be both.
I
Um,
think Alfie will get it together. It'll be like nothing's linear,
no,
nothing
nothing is linear, but I
all in
think
one
he will.
direction.
And that
I
was one
think,
thing I thought about. The other thing was when he was like doing the math and running all the reports on the flower
uh,
shop, like in my head, I saw this whole like not like a training montage, but like
I
like
like that.
Alfie learning how to do things and oh,
So to be fair, for running reports, he already knows how to do things. That's his background. That's his strength.
but he's
Um,
also learning like all the like I could just like in my
yeah.
head, I had this really glorious training video um that was really fun. Anyway, so thanks for that. It was super fun. All right. Here is from Kaylee. Which this is I like this. Which character did you first come up with in Pansies?
So I very seldom come up with characters sequentially. Um,
Okay.
so the idea behind Pansies was to do, Pansies is basically a small town romance. That's the idea. It is, I suppose. I suppose if I had to like chicken egg it, I suppose Alfie came first in the
Yeah.
sense that Alfie is. So if you think about the classic small town romance, the story is she went off to the big city and then she goes back to her hometown and she realizes all the stuff that she missed from like small town America and that the bad coastals like took away from her and she falls in love with a local boy who does like local small town America things
Runs a
and
Christmas tree farm.
runs a Christmas, exactly, who runs a Christmas tree farm, because it's very often a Christmas movie, precisely. And
Yes.
so basically, it was that story, but gay and in England. And okay, but gay in England and perhaps less, perhaps a little bit less flinching about the more negative aspects of small town life, which I think are important if you are going to do a gay small town story, because, and I don't want to generalize, not everyone's experiences are the same, but for a lot of people, there are difficulties being gay in a small town.
Yeah.
Um, and so I wanted, so I kind of had like, and I'm using gendered language here because I'm talking about a gendered trope that I was riffing on. So I basically had the girl from the big city who became Alfie Bell, and there needed to be the guy with the Christmas tree farm. And I think I very consciously didn't want the guy with the Christmas tree farm to be a guy with a Christmas tree farm, partly because we don't have Christmas tree farms. We must do. We must get our Christmas trees from somewhere, but like we don't have not like in that way. And I think I specifically wanted to, I hate saying subvert because it feels very self-aggrandizing, but to almost subvert that trope by having the guy with the Christmas tree farm actually really want to get out of the small town and to be navigating that at the same time that the girl from the big city is realizing how much she wants to come back to the small town. And so that then
Yeah.
led
Yeah. Yeah.
to, and then that led to the whole like kind of the broader angle and to the deeper themes about like kind of being in love with your childhood bully and uh, and of course you have the and then it also of course leads to the entire assisted dying thing because
Oh,
once you've got well the guy with the Christmas tree farm needs to have left and come back for a reason and then it's like and I think at the time I'd been looking into that kind of thing a lot you know for whatever reason, I consumed some media about it. Um, and so that then became
yeah. Yeah. Okay, you go and then I have something.
No, there's no
Okay, so
that became the
I'm
book.
doing this. I'm following directions.
Yeah, it is spoilers.
This is spoilers.
Yeah,
If you don't want to hear something, mute. I'm
yeah,
going to keep my hand up the whole time I say it.
yeah.
Nora's note on the bathroom mirror.
Mm-hmm.
That was such a beautiful example of show not tell.
Mm-hmm.
So
Thank you so much.
well done. Okay, we're done talking about it.
Yeah.
Hand down. Okay, here's a question from Eros. Is there something about your hometown, a favorite food, a certain place to visit or experience that you enjoy but is slightly baffling to outsiders?
Um, honestly, kind of. I mean, so um, I'm always a bit cagey about where my hometown is. I
So sorry. So, like, when you talked about, so for me, what was baffling to me, like, I'm still not quite sure what a cheese stoddy is.
oh, it's a big flowery kind of bap.
Okay, but like, what's the, is it, so is it just, is it not just, is it slices of cheese inside a big floury bat?
It kind of varies. It's often grated. Like it's mostly just kind of a way of doing like a cheese sandwich essentially.
Okay,
It's
so,
just a
okay.
particular. It's not like super special. There's no like particular. I yeah. It's more about the kind of the big floweriness.
So it's more about the bread than it is about the filling.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That helps me picture what that is. Here is one from Claire, who loves the annotations in the reissued Spires books a lot and wonders if the process of analyzing your work, looking back on it over those four books, has impacted how you write new things.
I mean that's really hard to know. Probably.
Okay.
Just because like well I mean it always feels like a cop out to say like kind of well doesn't everything impact how you write actually but that which sounds really sorry this is a terrible reference to a 1990s sketch comedy show but there used to be a show called This Morning with Richard Not Judy and they'd have a regular sketch of like Jesus and his disciples and Jesus would say like one of the parables and the disciples would like all go and then Thomas would be like hang on a second but what about this um so I sometimes feel a bit Jesus and his disciples were like um and so but actually this is one of those situations where the really hand wavy oh well everything impacts it is probably the right answer which I'm aware probably sounds a bit naff but
Yeah.
yeah I
Heard.
can't give specifics but yeah absolutely you can't look back on four books you wrote a decade ago and write annotations on them and not at least
Right.
subconsciously pick something up.
Right. Um, from hang on. My thing just shifted. Why did that do that to me? Stop that. Okay, from Carla, in the foreword, you mentioned that Pansies was your most ambitious book at the time you wrote it.
Yes.
Do you still consider that your most ambitious book? And if not, what do you think is your most ambitious
Oh
book? That's
gosh, I
been
think
published. That's been published. I'm not
yeah,
asking you to look at anything that way.
I th that's a really hard question. I think it's a lot easier to say this was my most ambitious book at the time than it is to say what my most ambitious book is now. Um, because I mean, like, I think long-time listeners will know that I have a huge issue with superlatives. It's a
Really?
lot easier to do that from a
Really?
yeah, yeah, it's a lot easier to say that when I only had about three or four books under my belt. Like I think in
Heard.
some ways Ten Things was quite ambitious because it was weaving a lot of different stuff together, had a huge cast. Um, like in some ways, I thought Founding Oath was quite ambitious. Because again,
Yes.
that had like multiple parallel storylines. It had a lot of world building going into it.
So much.
The material series, which has wound up being like the boyfriend material books, which are pretty much now nailed down to being a trilogy, is very ambitious. The Alden's Knives trilogy was also quite ambitious again, trilogy. Like
Yeah.
I don't want I wouldn't want to give me tell you what ask me the question in 10 years time and I'll come back and tell you which of the books I published up until now were my most ambitious looking back on them from 10 years in the future.
Yeah. That's fair. Um, Here's one from Kate. who loves the friendships that you portray in your books, including Kitty and Greg and Pansies. Yes, also shout out to Kitty and Greg.
Oh, thank you.
I would love to meet Kitty in London and have her take me somewhere that I know would be fabulous, and her conversation would be amazing. And she's just so interesting. Anyway,
Oh, good.
um, you don't have to pick only one, but which of your characters' friend groups would you like to be part of?
Oh, good lord. I mean, I mean, I'm incredibly antisocial, so probably none of them. Like weird. I mean, so weirdly, and this is not great because it's from something that's not had a re-release yet. I'm probably actually uh probably actually the MMO guild from Looking for Group, because
Yeah,
that kind of overlaps with my actual interests.
yeah,
Like
that's fair.
yeah, my days of going out doing London stuff of any variety are kind of behind me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, d- 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 if and you can pass on this one because I know you haven't had an opportunity to be consuming a lot of pop culture or things
Mhm,
outside of your own life right now. Um, from Glendy, your books are they're Lost on the Desert Island books.
mhm.
They are curious. Do you want to any of your favorite authors? I mean, I guess we could go back and look at your Instagram. I was just looking at that one where your
Oh yeah.
favorites of
Again, I am
yeah.
legendarily terrible at picking
So
favorites.
I would say scroll Alexis's Instagram, and I think it was you had a part one and part two. Was it favorite books of 23? I think it was,
Yeah, likely.
and it was a great. That was a fantastic list.
Yeah.
Um, it was a really great list. I cannot name any of the books on it, and I'm so sorry because I just read it like
No,
2
that's
hours
okay.
ago, but it is a really, really great list. Also, I would direct you to, if you want a beautiful visual sense of place, to Alexis's Instagram at the end of November 2022. I rewatched those this morning, and I was
Oh.
noticing all these things that you mentioned in
Hmm.
Pansies.
Yeah.
It was so much fun. It was a little travelogue. All you needed to
Yeah.
do was have gone and gotten ice cream.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm sure if it was November, to be fair.
They might have been closed. Do they close? Are they only open seasonally?
No, they'll be open. It's just, it's just one does not always personally want ice cream in November.
Excuse me, I always want ice cream.
Yeah, I think I probably did. So I think the other thing is that like I'm not usually a foodstagrammer.
Fair, fair. Okay, a cheese and onion toasty. Is that what I would call a grilled cheese sandwich?
Uh, Probably yes. I mean,
Okay,
except it's got onions in it.
say it again.
Except if a cheese and onion toasty has onions in it, so it'd be a grilled cheese sandwich with onions. A cheese toasty would be a grilled cheese sandwich.
I am like
Um,
totally making, I'm gonna go saute some shallots. Oh
ooh,
my God. I am so excited for this with nice white bread and cheddar
yeah,
cheese.
yeah. Yeah, I think I could maybe argue that I almost feel like a proper toast needs to be made in like a Breville sandwich maker, but I don't think that's actually a
Okay.
full. I don't think that's actually necessary for the toasty experience. I think that's.
Well, I will just have to get myself to England and eat my weight in toasties. Um, by the way, one other person did want to say thank you so much for giving us a mathsy person. And it made
All right.
them also a mathsy person very happy. And I will tell you, I learned far more about derivatives than I ever expected I would, thanks to a conversation I had with someone who lives in the same house as me.
Cool.
And I was able to comprehend it. So
Excellent.
it was great. I think we are getting near the top of the hour, so I am going to respect everyone's time. Again, Alexis, I'll share these with you and your team. And if you have time and bandwidth to answer them, great. If not, thank you to everybody who sent in so many wonderful questions. It was super fun. And there were a lot. Um, I uh it's been a week.
It has been a week. It's been a hell of a week.
It's been actually, and for me, it's been a month.
Yeah,
And
of course.
I cannot understate to all of you watching the great joy and solace you bring us at the store.
Thank you so
When
much.
we see an order, when we see a note, uh, when we get to pack up all the books with all the
Mhm.
swag and send them out the door, it really brings us great joy. So thank you to everyone who's watching for continuing to do that. Alexis, my friend,
Thank you very much. It's a lot. It's a big stack of books, isn't it? That is a
it
huge stack of.
is
They look so
again,
nice, like laid together like that.
it looks so beautiful. I'm sorry that this is the ARC and not the
Oh,
finished
that's
copy
all
that has.
right.
I know
It's
I was just a little annoyed that it had the white stripe in there, but look at
oh, there
that.
is
That
that.
is a beautiful thing.
That is beautiful.
And look at that beautiful thing that A, you created, and B, Sourcebooks and Elizabeth Turner Stokes and the art department at Sourcebooks designed the heck out of.
They did indeed. They knocked it out of the park. I
It
love it.
is just seeing these on my shelf, and I'm sure all of y'all seen them on your shelf. I hope it brings you as much joy as it brings me, because we all need joy right now.
Absolutely.
And we will wake up and we will face the day,
Absolutely.
because that's what we will do. So, friends, thank you for joining us. Alexis's team behind the scenes, thank you from the bottom of my heart. You've made the day go a little brighter, and I appreciate that.
That's no problem. Thank you so much for having me. Everybody, do take care of yourselves.
Okay,
Goodbye.
bye, everybody.
Bye.